Rick Perry, former energy secretary and former Texas governor, and a very dear friend and mentor on all these matters. Rick Perry, welcome back, as always. I mean, Rick, is it a coincidence? Am I completely wrong? Somehow Putin seems to get very adventuresome when oil goes into triple digits or more. But when oil stays low, because we open the spigots, we don't really hear from the guy. Please, weigh in on this. Maybe I'm nuts. Maybe I have this story all wrong.
No, I think you're spot on. As usual, Mr. Kudlow, the wizard of the West Wing. Listen, Larry, we've known that this is what was going to happen when we let Europe, and interestingly, a Europe that has been influenced by a teenage girl who has a mental condition, making policy, economic policy through their green agenda. I mean, it's just you can't make this stuff up. Is that supposedly thoughtful men and women in the European Union being influenced with a young individual who has no knowledge of how the world works, haranguing them about the use of fossil fuels. What they should do is go get Alex Epstein's book, Fossil Future, and read it and let it really educate them about why fossil fuels are so important to the world. The third world countries that will never get out of poverty are going to rely upon fossil fuels going forward, or they're going to die early deaths because this mania of the environment has overrun common sense and stopped good, thoughtful, and I might add, clean burning fossil fuels to allow better quality of life. I just don't get that from the standpoint of a public policy. But you're absolutely correct. Putin understands one thing, and that's power. And power comes with money. And in his case, money comes from the fossil fuel industry that he has in that part of the world. And when he can cut off his competitors, i.e., the LNG that America could have laid in to Germany very, very easily, then he's going to use that power. He's going to cut off the power to Europe this winter. Just count on it. The Ukrainians are already suffering because of the invasion, and they will suffer worse when that fuel, that power is cut off, as will the European Union. They're already transitioning back to old, dirty, burning coal plants, Larry. I mean, the idea that the European environmentalists have so miscalculated what's going on. And frankly, it's going to hurt people up to and including people losing their lives this winter because of the cold.
You know, I spoke last night briefly on this. Trump, you, myself, Wilbur Ross, many of us, Dan Briette, we were LNG salesmen. We tried to convince all these European leaders to open up, to build refineries and so forth, so we could sell them lots of LNG. Ours was cheap. We could compete with Russia. Russia had to subsidize their price to even sell it at $9 or $10. We started, I remember talking to Darren Wood and some others at Exxon selling it for $5, $6, $7. Anyway, the point is Germany wouldn't do it. Angela Merkel wouldn't do it. Other countries did, but they wouldn't do it. But the main thing was Trump turned on the spigots. So the oil price stayed around $50 a barrel for most of his term. I mean, it went down lower than that, obviously, during COVID. But the average price was 50. Putin can't make enough money at 50 to wage war and start taking out Georgia, the Crimea, or Ukraine. And then we're in this terrible war with Ukraine. And then we've created this high inflation, which is going to lead to the Fed tightening into a very difficult recession. And the middle class in the United States and elsewhere, and the lower middle classes, are absolutely going to get clobbered. Now, I know the recession has brought oil down. Brent is only $76 a barrel. I get all that. But my point is, Rick, this need not have happened because of these radical climate policies and that gal at the Davos conference that you're referring to and all that crazy nonsense. This should not have happened. This short-sightedness, these mistakes, these unscientific assertions have led us to a situation that could have been entirely avoided. And the prosperity at low, affordable, plentiful fossil fuels could have continued for a long time. That's my point.
And the climate would have been impacted in a positive way as well. I think that's what gets lost in this, the LNG transferring old inefficient coal plants for LNG, clean burning natural gas. Larry, we went to Europe, I think in early 2018, and we warned them that if they allowed for the opening of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, that they would pay a price at some time in the future. We talked about delivering freedom molecules in the form of American liquefied natural gas. And there were people on the left that snickered at that and made fun of it. But the fact is, we were spot on right. Russia is using energy as a weapon. He always has, he always will. And wise leaders in America understand that. I don't think we have wise leaders in America at the moment.
Rick, one more thing while we got you here. Big story today, China and Saudi Arabia making oil deals and trade deals and so forth. What's China doing nosing around Saudi Arabia? Are they trying to bust up our relationship, which is in bad shape to begin with because of the Biden short-sightedness? What's China nosing around for?
Well, China's nosing around everywhere. It's not just in Saudi Arabia. They're all over China. They're in South America. I would suggest to you they're probably in Central America if we worked or looked very closely. But certainly going into Saudi Arabia, which I happen to think that the Saudis, with the leadership that they have, the visionary leadership that they have, I mean, they're going to be trillions of dollars spent in the kingdom over the course of the next decades, creating a really dynamic economy. And the Chinese look at that and they go, hey, why not us? And we opened the door for that, Larry. That's the problem. We had a fabulous working relationship with the kingdom, from the top to the bottom, with their Aramco, with various and sundry individuals there. And President Trump did an excellent job of developing that relationship. I mean, up to and including seeing the Saudis being able to have conversations with people in the Middle East that they'd never had conversations with before, clearly standing up against the Iranians. America was, I think, one of the strongest times in its history during the Trump years, and we frittered it away with a president who, for whatever reason, decides to continue to play to his left, and it may be playing to his left, but it's not playing to our allies in the Middle East. And Saudi Arabia was one of the strongest allies that we had, and I think that's being put in jeopardy.
You know, I didn't know, Rick, but from reading the news today, the Saudis are China's biggest oil suppliers. I didn't know that. And there's something about that that I don't like. I don't know whether even that might wind up affecting international financial payments, exchange payments, whether it's going to hurt the dollar or not. But the Saudis, they're their biggest oil supplier. They're probably thinking more about China than they are about us. That worries me a lot. And I think you're right. I think Biden drove Saudi Arabia away from us because of their playing footsie with Iran, human rights above any other reforms that you talked about, MBS making some economic reforms. I think it's a big mess. I think it's an absolute big mess. I don't like to read about China nosing around Saudi Arabia. I can't stop them, but I don't like to read about them. I'll give you the last word.
Well, hopefully your old statement of the cavalry is on the way in January the 3rd. Part of the cavalry is going to get there and hopefully block this president from doing continual harm to America on the national front as well as the international.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Rick Perry, former Energy Secretary. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very, very much.